Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. Today we're going to continue with our roster prediction series, and I figured since we've already covered Slaanesh, why not try something a little slower? So this time let's cover Nurgle. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, my knowledge from this is coming from the tabletop itself and the lore, and as I said, the Chaos Gods had a lot of stark differences between their rosters. Khorne focused around raw brutality, up close and personal without the use of magic trickery. Slaanesh focused around speed, trying to outwit your enemy by surrounding them in multiple sides. Nurgle's armies, on the other hand, would focus around brute strength in a certain sense. More toughness than anything, this would be a slow-moving army but extremely durable. So with that, let's go with a prediction given what we know about Khorne, with what we could expect from the Nurgle release in the future. We'll start off with a Legendary Lord option, and it's likely to be Khorgarth Plaguefather, mainly because this Great Unclean One is the one who most resembles Nurgle in a sense. While the other Great Unclean Ones are very able to make plagues on their own and cause, well, destruction anywhere they roam, Khorgarth seems to focus more on breeding new plagues. He is more fascinated with his research than he is with anything else. His lore is focused around academic research more than anything, but he is more than capable to do some damage. In fact, Khorgarth is a relatively strong melee lord. And what would set him apart from other Great Unclean Ones is the fact that he also has a magical weapon which acts as a stone thrower, meaning this character is not only very durable with a very high health pool, but he would do a lot of damage and will also be able to act as a moving artillery piece too. There are a few other options which would be possible, but Khorgarth seems to be the most likely choice, as of course the confirmation of Skarbrand, which was the strongest demon, or at least at the time, points that we will likely be getting greater demons, or the most famous greater demons, better yet said, for each respective Chaos faction at the very beginning. This leads us to our Lord options, and of course as Khorne had two, we can expect two here. First, we'd expect the Exalted Great Unclean Ones, the Greater Demons of Nurgle, which are again very durable in close combat. Nurgle demons such as the Great Unclean Ones, or practically any Nurgleite demon, isn't heavily armored, but in fact is incredibly tough. This will be an imposing legendary lord, not just tall, but thick with two C's. While it's also melee focused, we are aware that Great Unclean Ones can normally use magic. This is either the Law of Nurgle or the Law of Death, meaning that you have a tanky spellcaster, and these are incredibly rare. You can keep them up close and personal, doing loads of damage, but not have to worry too much about losing them. Next, of course, we'll move to the Heralds of Nurgle, as we're aware that Heralds are being moved up to the Lord option instead of Hero. This is a more man-sized version of the Great Unclean One, essentially. It has a high toughness value, high health pool, and has access to the Law of Nurgle and the Law of Death. It's exactly the same, just smaller and easier to move around. What would set this apart from the Exalted Great Unclean One would be its mount option, as the Heralds of Nurgle had an option of a mount known as a palanquin. This was essentially a chariot that was pulled by hundreds of Nurglings, and really it made them much more durable. The Heralds would still move relatively slowly, even with this chariot / platform of a mount, as they were mostly focused around just moving in a zombie-like form. The mount option fits perfectly with the theme of Nurgle for a slow tanking movie army, though I believe that one mount option clearly is not enough, especially for a Lord choice, so I'm assuming they might do something different and allow Heralds of Nurgle to fly on rotflies. We're going to talk about rotflies more in depth in just a little bit, but essentially these are flying, very tanky units. They're not incredibly fast and very slow when on grounded form, but the idea is to give them an option for something else. And it'll make a lot more sense whilst we go down the more predicted units. Let's move on to the hero choices. Of course, since Khorne had the Blood Reaper elevated to hero, then it only makes logical sense for the Plague Ridden, a champion Plague Bearer, to be able to be elevated to hero stance too. Again, this would act in the exact same way as the Herald of Nurgle too, just a bit weaker and being a hero option. And I'm assuming that it would also have the mount options too. But here's where things get a little bit different. So of course we're having to go by what we can expect, and I think that we would then see the Blighted Acolytes. This is a mortal Nurgle champion very similar to that of the Cultist of Khorne. In fact, it comes from the same series, just a different book. There's usually two versions, either the Chaos Sorcerer or Nurgle, or the Exalted Champion, and I think that they'd probably go with the Exalted Champion just to add in a decently fast, still relatively slow though, moving melee champion. Perhaps the champion himself will also only have access to a Chaos Steed, though it would be rather cool if he had access to a Rotfly. Of course, this is pure speculation still, but it kind of fits with the theme that Khorne had more or less. But with that, now we can move towards the melee units, and of course we'll talk about the Plague Bearers of Nurgle, and naturally we can expect Exalted Plague Bearers of Nurgle too. These are slow and tanky units, very durable. They wear no armor, and in fact you'd think of them being more like zombies. However, they are far from it. They're extremely durable and do pack a very strong punch. Think of these as unarmored Chaos Warriors. Now they would move very slow too, but the idea of these demons was a slow-moving wall of flesh, very intimidating as you're watching something that is taking a while to get taken down. Of course, now we move on to mortal infantry, and I do believe that the Nurgle forces would make great use from standard Chaos Warriors. I do hope that visually they're not just men in armor and there's loads of extra pus and like tumors and so on because it fits with the Nurgle theme, but Nurgle is very similar to that of Khorne in the sense that there is a high melee focus. However, the faction should focus around hard-hitting stuff, so instead of having axe and shield, dual axes and halberds, we should have sword and shield, or mace and shield would be pretty good too. Halberds still work quite well, as obviously you want an anti-large unit, and then of course great weapons, anti-armor. That's something that packs a right-on wallop, and it fits with Nurgle's theme incredibly well. Believe it or not, for both tabletop and lore, cavalry for Nurgle was very common, and we should expect some form of cavalry units to make it into the first roster. Of course, plague drones would be the first one, monstrous flying cavalry. Like I explained before, fast moving when on the air, but fairly slow when on the ground, and I mean very, very slow. These were always represented to be very tanky and fairly good line breakers. The only problem is the moment that you had them on the ground for anything, any spells that might keep them grounded and so on, they did not become very useful. They also had a decent upgradable range weapon too, which if translated into Total War would work out rather well. It would give you some mid to short range weapon which you could then use before you go into the enemy lines itself. Weaken them a little bit, or maybe use them as a support unit before going in. Chaos Knights of Nurgle would also be expected here, as honestly it is important, and some form of cavalry unit would be very, very useful. Chaos Knights are fairly heavy and it fits with the theme rather well. But before we move on, I know some people are going to mention the Toad Riders and so on, and yes, I think that we'll get them eventually, but that will likely be in some form of Tamukhan DLC. I mean, it would be kind of silly if they didn't add in any form of Tamukhan DLC in the future, because I'm pretty sure something like that would sell rather well. But now let's move on to monsters and beasts. First up we have the Chaos Furies, because it's extremely expected. These are Chaos Undivided Demons, which are expected to show up quite often. We've already got them for Khorne, and it would be a massive shame if we don't see them for every monogod faction. They're not great, they're basically, demonic harpies, but it's still thematic and it fits rather well. You could also use them to support the Plague Drones, so you've got some synergy over there. Have the Furies hold down an enemy and then smash the drones right in. Beasts of Nurgle are very much expected. They are Nurgle's demonic version of Chaos Spawn in a way, just a lot more smilier. And it could be assumed that they'll fill more or less the same battlefield role. These are units which are actually fairly decently moving, so you can have them about doing some damage, smashing into enemy lines, and being able to take advantage of regeneration. They should be able to stay in the battle for a long time. Again, this is also a Nurgle demon, so it should be able to hold out for quite some time and have a very large health pool. Nurglings are a hot topic, and I didn't know where to put them in this ranking because they could have fit in monsters, they could have fit in infantry. Technically they're a swarm, and that has its own classification. Now, this is a bit of an issue. You see, swarm units aren't used in Total War Warhammer. In fact, any representation of swarms is usually through some sort of spell or ability and something like that. But Nurglings are iconic, not just in Warhammer Fantasy, but Age of Sigmar and 40k too. I mean, there's an incredibly popular meme of the Nurglings, which you can see on screen right now, so I think that even Creative Assembly know that it would be a massive shame to skip out on Nurglings. And if I can be perfectly honest, if we're missing out on End Times units and Age of Sigmar stuff, then Nurgle is at the moment missing out on a lot of stuff. It's likely that Nurgle might be the smallest Chaos roster at launch until DLC comes out, but 10 points to Creative Assembly if they can figure out how to include Sassy Nurgling into the Nurgling unit if we do get one. In terms of any Beastmen units that could be implemented, maybe a Beastmen variant of the Giant would be interesting, something slowish and hard-hitting which fits with the Nurgle theme once again. We still don't know if we're eventually going to see Pestigors, but then again, we haven't really seen how Pestigors are at the moment. If not Pestigors, then I'd say Bestigors with great weapons, but then again, aren't those the old version of Pestigors? So it's very grey area at the moment. The Soul Grinder could work rather well as a Nurgle unit too. However, if they're going to make a Soul Grinder for Nurgle, it can't look like the one that we're getting for Khorne. This is the concept art, and yes, it looks incredibly well, but a chiseled body like that, that's not very much like Nurgle, is it? It's just a bit too perfect in a sense. If we do end up with a Soul Grinder for every faction, at least the Nurgle one should look unique, very similar to that of the Plague Hulk, which yes is more 40k, but then again the whole aesthetic of the Soul Grinder is very 40k anyway, but this is a better representation of what everything should be in Nurgle. I mean, who needs abs when you have kebabs, right? Lastly, I do expect some sort of war machine, where the Palanquin of Nurgle would be turned into some Nurgle type of moving war shrine. It makes a lot of sense to have some sort of buffing unit. Something that will perhaps give regeneration to your troops, or maybe make them a bit more durable, so they don't get shot into oblivion. I mean, it just looks like something that could be done, and they've already done something similar to Khorne, where they made their own shrine unit after the Blood Throne was given to someone else. So I think something like that would work very well. That's pretty much it when it comes to a possible Nurgle roster, or at least this is my prediction, and I think everything outlined is pretty fair. There would be some units that could be moved around and so on, but I think that the theme works rather well, including the Mortals and the Beastmen. Of course, this is just predictions, and I could be very wrong here, but what do you guys think about this? Do you think it's okay, or something like that would be too similar to Khorne, so we need to be switched around a little bit? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.